Ready.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Today is Wednesday, April 24th, 2024. It is 4 p.m. sharp. I'd call this meeting of the New Shoreham Town Council to order and begin with our consent agenda. This is an annual permission. There's only one item on it, so we guess we didn't need to, but what's that?
Before we start, could I ask that we add public comment to the agenda at some point?
Short to this agenda?
Mhm.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know
Sorry,
whether we
didn't realize
can.
it wasn't on there,
Ask Millie.
but could we ask it, could we add it as like item 2 or item 3?
Right, you can make a motion to amend the agenda.
Could I make a motion to amend the agenda and add public comment?
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor
I
indicate by
could have
saying.
a question. Chris.
Yeah.
I thought there was a, and I know we ignored it for a long time, but I thought there was, a ruling that public comment was too broad from the AG's office, that it had to be specific because people didn't know. Where did that come from?
I think you're thinking of reports,
You're
like we
thinking of
can't do
board
a
report.
town manager
Board's
report
report,
or
okay.
wards report.
That's right, because we don't
Yeah.
have any dialogue on public comment. Thank you.
Right, any further discussion? Not all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no, the ayes have it. So on consent, this is Tim McCabe's annual request to ride his horses on the road. Is there any objection to that? If not, can you make a motion, Tristan? That would be the easiest thing. Just make a motion to issue this, grant this request from Rustic Rides.
I'll make a motion to grant the request from Rustic Rides.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Item number 2 is now public comment.
Okay, well. Person who's making public comment has not arrived yet, so. Could we?
Can I make a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Are we gonna have a chance to discuss the warrant, or is that? Because it's not your consent, agenda, not. It's like consent agenda.
No, warrant isn't on our consent agenda. No. No, absolutely. not. Is it Persephone wanted to speak?
Jess is coming from the vote and she has all every point to address this current school issue.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
But she's coming from the vote, so I don't have all the information she has.
Gotcha.
So it's-
Well, if there's no objection, and Millie, procedurally, can we just
You can just suspend it. it's fine.
just suspend it until someone gets here?
Thank you.
Discuss an act, item number, what would be 3, discuss an act on approval of the warrant for May 6th, 2024 financial town meeting. Amy, do you want to walk us through this? Is that we usually do it, if I recall correctly?
And do we want to go item by item, or you want to talk about the, thank you, primary items for this year?
And knock out the primary
Okay.
items and if people have questions or would like you to go into greater detail, that's fine.
There are really only 2 anomalies. The first is on the second page, and it's a borrowing question, $1 million of authorization related to road improvements. We do have, I think, about $300,000 left from the previous $1 million authorization that's committed to a project that we have some matching funds for. And so it would be time to renew our authorization. That allows us to do projects piggybacking on whenever the state is out here
Right.
doing additional work,
Yep.
for example. So that's actually worked really well for us. So that's on page 2. And then the other item is a little more unusual, and that is, where is it? Page 4. If you remember that the council was looking to adjust the fee schedule for fines related to shellfish.
Oh, yes.
And so this would ratify that action, so that the warrant and the ordinances are duly authorized.
Gotcha.
I took it only to the 250, which is what the ordinance was written as. I did not go any further than than what was
Yeah,
there.
that's
So,
great.
But we still have 3 months in jail.
yes.
I do like this column that sums it up. And really appreciate the work that goes into this. Kim, did you have any?
And I have,
Please, come aboard.
it's just reminded. Just for my own education, I got confused at the last budget hearing, we were talking about the warrant and talking about the waiver process. There was quite a discussion about where that would be on the warrant. So I don't see it on the warrant, so I'd really love to know if
Where
that's,
is it?
if we have any input on that at all. Or what that was all about.
So we have not, only one other time in our history have we asked directly the question about the override. It's always been implicit in adoption of the budget that it supports a tax levy greater than the 4%. The last time around, we did add a sentence to the tax resolution that says said tax includes X amount in excess of the 4% property tax cap authorized by Rhode Island general law. So I've used that structure again this time. I think the tax resolution was attached to the back of the warrant in packets, or I know it's on the first page.
Yeah,
Yes.
I don't have it up here, but the council does have it. An extra. Yeah. Thanks.
So that's my suggestion for keeping that structure that we've used previously, and it does become authorized as part of the tax resolution.
Excuse me, is your mic on? Because I'm having trouble hearing anything you say.
It is, but I'll stand closer.
And I'm trouble hearing out too much already. Thank you.
So that's my recommendation for how that would proceed. Questions or comments?
Any questions?
Let me add one more, which is my reluctance to put it at the beginning, which is a suggestion that made it to the floor in our last conversation, is that it doesn't provide the benefit of the storytelling and context of all the things that go into the budget. It becomes a question that is on the table without context. And I'm just not comfortable with that. I
I
think
agree with
we
that.
need to go through the mechanics of the budget in order for people to make an informed decision.
I agree with that. And I don't necessarily, I was just confused because it seemed like it was going to be something that people could vote on. When it's in the resolution, seems like it's too late to have a meaningful vote on that. And maybe that's the way it's supposed to be, and that's fine. But that wasn't the kind of this way the discussion was flowing at the last meeting. And if somebody wanted to, take things out of the opera or take out of the previous budget to make a point, and reduce that number by even a small amount, I'm not sure what the process would be for that.
So I think that is the
That
process.
is the process.
If somebody wanted, if somebody's point was not necessarily about a particular line item, but in a number of line items to reduce the levy and make sure that we were not going over the cap, we would do it at each operating budget level. And in the documentation, I have called out with boxes each of the line items that are related to the overage, so that as we flip pages, we can talk about this item is part of the package, if you will, of the override. And therefore, if people are not comfortable with the override as an entire concept, this is where we would want to remove it or find some other alternative.
Amy, how far back did you look on the vote on this?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
When we had the override before?
I only went through my personal history, so 20 years.
Okay. Because we did do this in the either late 80s or very, very early
Back that far.
90s.
Melinda Carlton was the manager and she'd gone to the Kentucky Derby. Oh, believe me, this is how I remember it. She'd gone to the Kentucky Derby. Left us to deal with it. And I thought there was a vote. You weren't on the council, but
I was, I
Sure.
remember when you went to the Kentucky Derby too, but I don't remember that detail, but I just don't have that strong a memory, but
So
that was,
just sort of ask, I think what Kim is asking, so the items that are in the override budget are individually listed throughout the budget.
They are individually identified, yes.
Okay, so they're individually identified throughout the budget. It's not like one lump at the beginning or the end, or,
Exactly. So in a scenario where you did ask that singular question, do you authorize an override of the tax cap in this amount for this purpose? You would either take the aggregate amount, and if the vote was no, we'd have to go back and amend the operating budget for each of those items. Or you could ask them individually, but we'd still have to go back and authorize the department level expenditure in the revised amount.
But
So I
it's
think
not-
either way, you wind up back at the operating budget, amending the bottom line and taking out specific items.
so from a procedural point of view, would you do that right up front when the first motion to approve the operating before they start going through the
We're gonna-
departments? For instance, and I'll just give an example, because I just want to know.
Yeah.
If I wanted to say, make a motion to take the money, $30,000 for the Graces Cove thing, and have that reduction show up in a reduction in the amount that we have to ask for a waiver, that's not necessarily connected to the things that have been identified for the waiver, I don't think. But could somebody do that, and would they have to do it when you got to the?
Capital in that case.
Who
Yeah.
was it?
That would be in capital.
At the Capitol?
Yep.
Okay. And, okay,
So my intention would be, we have a motion to consider the operating and capital budget. We try to pause then and do a little bit of an overview. Usually the town manager introduces the budget, and then we can talk about some high level things. Sometimes we talk about salary negotiations and things like that. That's where my intention would be to describe the override process, what goes into it, and where people can find those items throughout the budget.
I guess I think you said that you don't necessarily have to move to remove the override thing. It could be take X number of dollars from the operating bicycle budget in the police or something like that.
And don't put it anywhere else. Yeah.
And don't put it anywhere
Right.
else, so that can reduce the amount of the request for the waiver.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
That's how I understand
yeah,
it.
that.
That's why the
Make sure.
tax has to come at the end, because otherwise you're approving a tax rate for a budget that isn't.
Yeah,
Right.
I get that. I
Yeah.
just wanted to know how a person would do this standing up there.
Let's see.
Yeah.
Not that I think
Right,
anybody.
because
would.
I'm imagining that like you're feeling the same way I am, right? That if there is sort of a feeling of the voters that they don't want one of those items in, you kind of don't want them to vote everything down because they don't want one thing. I mean, at least that's how I feel, right? I feel like it's of course the will of the voters. I'm gonna say that there's a lot of people who don't understand how financial town meeting works. I've had a lot of conversations this week with people. I think you mentioned this at the last meeting, Kim, like that it's very important for people to understand that this is going to the financial town meeting is for the voters. So if you're a voter and you're out there and you're listening, because you're certainly not here in the room, like you still have an opportunity to examine this budget, question this budget, vote on this budget, make changes to this budget. I hope a lot of people understand that.
I would
Yeah.
add to that, if people know what they want to accomplish by bringing a question to the floor and they want to talk about procedure, feel free to reach out to me by email, by phone, and we can talk through mechanical things about how to make that happen. They can also ask from the floor the night of the meeting. I think we all need to bring our patience and understanding so that intentions don't get caught up in procedure.
Yeah, I'm afraid in these conversations, seems to be too much emphasis on the budget and the override items as a separate budget. And the override items are in a separate budget. They're part of the budget that creates the need for the override. And there could be, as there has been back when people used to come to those meetings, the thing you're not expecting is the one that blows up. And it has nothing to do with anything we've talked about.
Yep.
Can I ask one more question? Has the state approved our override? And if not, what's the timeline on that?
They have not yet. I mean, I would expect an answer before financial town meeting, but I don't think the council is meeting before that, so.
When does the notice have to be posted?
The notice should go out in Friday's paper, but that is somewhat disconnected from the authorization. They're approved separately. So
Okay.
there could be a disconnect between those two things.
It does have to go in the paper?
The request to certify compliance with the exemptions does not go in the paper.
So can I ask a different question then, which is if the state does not approve this by financial town meeting, is our plan to go ahead and have things approved or not approved as if they had, and then?
I don't expect we'll be in limbo. I expect
Okay.
we will have a response from them one way or another.
Thank you.
Yep.
I just want to say, I was trying to make understand that changes could be made.
Thank you.
If you agreed with all the items that you're asking for an override from, but you don't agree with something else, that you could
Right.
make a motion to reduce that amount, which would have an effect on the waiver. I'm not saying that
Yes.
would be
Yes.
against what the
Thank you,
waiver's
Kim.
for,
I
because
get it.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
can-
Thank you for clarifying that. Are there any other questions for Amy? David?
Not a question for Amy, and maybe it was already talked to and I didn't hear it. I apologize for that. With regard to the road improvement bond that we would be floating for the roads. What's at the top of the priority list? What's that?
No.
Kunis.
I don't have any bias behind this because those are all state roads. These are all town roads we're talking. So anyway, this sounds almost, hopefully there's a list that if a person got up at financial town meeting and asked that question, we'd be able to answer it in a similar fashion that we worked through the facilities budget at the hearings.
Marianne?
Yeah, we do have a list Amy's looking for right now. This list was put together with Jim Jeremy and Mike Shea.
So were you and they prepared to share that?
Yeah, I think Amy, I think a lot of it has to do with aprons and things like that, where the dirt roads are leaving to.
I thought that might be one anyway.
Yeah, and so because it is not full length roads, taking them all the way down, but doing aprons and other things, it includes Beacon Hill, Pilot Hill, Snake Hole, Connecticut Ave, and Grace's Cove.
And that would pretty much take up the million?
I
I didn't, you said
yes.
something earlier about a $300,000 that was left, but I actually didn't hear that.
Yep.
Other than the month, that $300,000.
From the previous authorization.
And this
yes.
also is matched with a grant from the state, correct?
Yes.
So we have grant state money also, 33% of the 1 million, right?
Correct.
So another 300,000.
Great.
Does that include the 20 million?
And these are just state roads. I'm sorry, these are just town roads. The 20 million is all state, that's all state, that's all right.
Got it. Okay. And this is just aprons, right? We're not paving the entirety of,
We are not
Beacon-
paving the entirety. I will get additional clarification from Mike if it extends beyond aprons. It may have some other road repair involved that would be included in road improvements, but we'll get
It's
a scope.
basically when the contractor is out here doing something on a state road, we jump on and say, can you pave?
Yes.
the aprons on the dirt roads, leading to Center Road.
Great, thank you.
Big one, if you look at Violet Hill.
Yeah.
That's a mess.
Right.
I live on corner, this just for the record.
I actually corrected.
Keith, I have one other item.
Yes,
Before we
please.
move on from the warrant, and that is also within the tax resolution, so it's distinct but related. And that is inclusion of a paragraph that says that said tax shall be calculated on 100% of the assessed value of the property, less any
Oh, right,
applicable
thank you.
exemptions. So this would be the effective shift from taxing at 80% of assessed value to 100% of assessed value. It is 100% my intention to keep that included. However, I am waiting for some final sign-offs from the state that everything will play out the way that we expect it to. If there are a lot of other shifts with the analysis that they're doing, they may ask us to defer that a year. But I would suggest that we keep it in the tax resolution, proceed down that path until somebody tells us
Great.
it's too messy.
And how many times are you prepared to say this doesn't change the size of the pie?
It does not change the size of the pie.
I was talking about the pie this morning.
Goodness. Any other questions? No? Comments? Thoughts? Can I have a motion to approve the warrant for the May 6, 2024 financial town meeting, please?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Let's go to public comment. Hi, Jess.
Hi, thank you
How are
for
you?
holding this. Sorry, of course, I didn't have a car in the boat, so the boat was full, it was packed.
Really?
I am Jessica Willie. I am well, I'm a lot of things, but right now I'm here as the chair of the school committee. I am here to give a little update on stuff that that's been happening at the school. I understand this is public comment, so it's public comment, but I'm assuming that everybody's familiar with what AHERA is, but I'm just gonna, for all those people listening, AHERA is Asbestos Hazard Emergency Response Act. And with that, all public schools are required to have a response plan in place. So it's done every 3 years. We have one online. We have certain people identified in certain roles within that plan. And there's a very specific plan that has to be followed when there is any sort of asbestos or hazardous material concern. And also, when we were doing the construction testing for the construction, before construction was to be done for this, our big construction project, there was uncovered some vermiculite, which is could be a product that could have asbestos in it, that was discovered in the attic above the 2 rows of ceiling tiles, because there's different stuff. And it was, air quality tests were done and everything was fine. And it was decided that when the big school project was done, we were gonna use money from the school project to clear that out. But it's at a cost of, it's like $500,000, I believe, what that's gonna cost. And it's part of the project. So that's just a little bit of background.
So that's not a new.
That's not a new thing,
Right.
no.
Yeah.
However, we were aware of that. The school's
Hmm?
been aware of that for however long. It's in the report. It's all online. So I've got a little timeline of events for you. One other thing I should say too, is that back in at the beginning of the school year, it was brought to the attention of the administration that some of the public address systems in the school weren't working. So in the elementary in particular, some of the teachers were saying it was hard to hear the PA system in the morning and everything else. And then the fire chief came in and said in the hallways, they weren't they weren't up to snuff. Some of them weren't working. So we had to have 45 speakers. We had to have a whole bunch of stuff done in the school to replace the PA system. Finding a time to do that. Anyway, it just so happened that it was over break. So over break, the IT department from Kingston, from North Kingston, who we contract with,
Right.
Block Island School contracts with the North Kingston IT department. So they came, they put 65 speakers in throughout the school to upgrade the PA system. On Thursday, 4/18, which was at the end of break, a teacher visited her elementary classroom and saw that the ceiling tiles had been removed, and she was familiar with the fact that the ceiling tiles weren't supposed to be removed. So she called administration. Administration immediately on 4/18 called the Ahara contractor, which we have a Ahara contractor because you have to. And the Ahara contractor immediately answered the phone and immediately said that the 6 rooms in the elementary area needed to have the heat ventilation turned off, all doors and windows closed, and do not enter signs on the doors. That was done by the Block Island School Ahara responsible person, as identified in the contract, by Tom Rism. He's our responsible person. So he went on, I don't know if he went on Thursday, but he was notified on Thursday. He may have done that on Friday. I'm not 100% sure when he went and did that, needed to be done. It was observed that small amounts of vermiculite insulation had fallen from the ceiling tiles. There was no way to know, but there was white dust on the floor, so they assumed there was something there. So vermiculite insulation is not an asbestos-containing material, but it could be. It's not necessarily, but it could be. So on Saturday and Sunday, an Ahara consultant sent a technician to collect air samples in the isolated elementary rooms. Samples were analyzed for fiber content. The results sent to the administration on 4/22, which is Sunday, or was that Monday, showed below detectable amounts of fiber at less than 0.002. As part of the process, the same samples are tested a second time, specifically for asbestos content. The results of those samples were sent to the administration on 4/23, showed that there were no detectable amounts of asbestos. In an abundance of caution, the rest of the new school was tested. So the air was tested in the rest of the school, not just the elementary wing. And that was also shown, those results just came back today, and they were also below the detectable amounts of fibers of less than 0.002. The Ahara consultant reported to the Department of Health that the school was safe to occupy. The administration team then worked with the teachers union, who was very concerned about entering the building and had sent a strongly worded letter about entering the building. So this administration worked with the teachers union to make sure that they would go back to school tomorrow, and then school was called on. So there will be school tomorrow. Policy and procedure has been followed. Our plan was followed, and that's the information that I have in front of me, and I would love, I know it's public comment, so I don't know if you can question me, but
I think we'll be very flexible if people
yeah.
have questions.
so I would just say too that we, obviously it was over break, so there was a lot of people not on island or in the school. And we, it's Block Island, so everybody knows everything as soon as everything happens, but, so.
Well, everybody knows that something happened and then they develop their own narrative.
So it was important to the administration to really have answers before, saying, they said, listen, we just have to cancel school because we don't know. We don't have we expect that this is nothing, but we don't know, and we want to make sure. And if it is something, we want to make sure we're following protocol. And it has come back everything's good, everything's clear, but we're still having a special contractor come in to clean it up. So the 4 rooms are still going to be closed off for a few days until the special contractor can get in there with HEPA vacuums and clean it up, even though there's nothing identified as hazardous.
Jess, first of all, thank you for taking the time to come and do this.
My pleasure.
You now found another thing that you're an expert in. You've now developed another area of expertise.
Just what I want it to be.
Are there any questions for Jess from the council or from the audience? No. Thank you so much.
Of course, and like I said, I understand that there's concerns, and I was getting the same questions that I'm sure all of you were from people, but there just weren't any answers. So
Yes.
now we have answers, and we're at the end of the incident. And so back to school as normal tomorrow, and that's good because then we don't have to go into
extra days.
the 19th, which
Yeah.
is holiday anyway. So
Right.
we have to go on anyway.
Yes. Thank you so much, guys. I know that
Thank you guys
was
for coming.
wonderful. Item number 4, discuss and act to set a public hearing date for New Shoreham General Ordinance Homestead Exemption. Who would like to walk us, do you want to walk through this? I think we probably should. Do you want to go?
So you do have a draft with some modifications since the last time we met. Those are fairly administrative and reflect the conversations that we've been having. One is to just formally use the phrasing of tax classification, which is what our enabling legislation says, and identify the 4 classes, which is consistent with state law. The second change was to allow for the applications in this first year to be accepted between June 1st and June 28th. Next year, we will have to amend that, but presumably we'll be looking at the ordinance again in its entirety. And then the third thing was to include residential condos, which had been excluded previously, but not deliberately. So those have been included.
I'm sorry, I mean, I just didn't hear you.
Residential condos had not been previously identified. So that leaves a couple outstanding items for us to resolve today, including settling on a residency definition, whether or not we use what's already provided for in section 2-2, and then fixing the exemption amount as a percentage.
Great. Are there any questions? I have a couple, but I can wait. Is it going to be possible, I've acknowledged how crazy problematic the math is, but is it going to be possible to run various scenarios at the average, sort of beyond what at the average of assessed value? Here's what it would be at 15, here's what it would be at 20.
Sure. If you think back, and if you have it to the
Yes,
memo
I do have that.
from the
Yeah.
18th,
Yeah,
yes, that starts to work through
Yeah.
a couple things, including what the exemption relief would be
yes,
at, say, 0%, which is where we are today, 5, 10, 12, 15, and then 20%. So
Right.
you can see those at $1 million valuation, for example, a 10% homestead exemption would provide property tax relief of about $482 for context,
that's based on last year's budget.
based on last year's budget. And so the flip side of that, because the pie is always the same, is if we extended a 10% homestead exemption, making a lot of assumptions about the number of properties that qualify, the mill rate today, which is $6.02, would adjust to $6.11, or a 1.5% increase for the rest of the population, in order to offset the revenue that's not coming in from the exemption. Is that
Yep,
clear?
I'm following you.
Yeah. So again, those are in the memo from the 18th, but that you can walk through some different scenarios on what it looks like for someone who qualifies for the exemption and what it looks like for the rest of the population who has to balance off that revenue.
I guess what I'm wondering is, if you did, could you do the same scenarios if the budget as it appears before the town meeting were passed? Because that ends up being the kind of.
Do you have the grand list yet?
We're still finalizing the grand list. We have some estimates, but that's what we're working through at the moment. And that starts to change more variables than I'm comfortable having out in the world today. It just means just about every variable in that equation is an assumption with varying levels of accuracy around them.
Mhm.
So what we can talk about is when you think of the budget that you've put forward to the voters, that has a 17.9% tax increase. If you think of the second page of the narrative, that tax increase for a property that's valued at $1 million represents about an 864
Yeah,
tax increase for that $1 million valuation. So you can start to tie the two scenarios together.
right.
But that's sort of as far as we can take that.
Gotcha. Fair enough.
In a typical year, we would, but don't forget that we're also dealing with a tangible exemption at
Yes,
the state level.
I know.
And that's the piece that just creates
Yeah.
too many variables.
Yeah.
So.
I also think, like, I understand we're doing both of these at the same time. But to look at it from a bigger place, like, we weren't able to do a homestead exemption until this past year.
Mhm.
And it's something that we would probably be talking about separate from the increase. So I don't know whether we should be attaching them to one another.
I think that's a really good point. I'm asking questions because of the way that my brain works. I have a really
Yeah.
hard time doing that third level calculation. So I was looking for someone to do it for me.
I can't do calculation. But yeah, but I think also, the increase is gonna be different on another year and like.
Yeah.
So what we're looking at, the exemption is sort of a long-term bit. Whereas hopefully this tax increase is more of a one-time spike. Am I being obtuse there?
No,
Hopefully.
no, I don't think you're being obtuse at all. I think it's,
I mean, I hope we don't have a 17%
no,
spike every year.
yeah.
But this becomes the new base, though.
Yes.
On the budget, yes.
Thanks.
But I think that's a really important point. I mean, I think the reason we pursued the legislation we pursued was to have this conversation. It's just happening probably more quickly than we had intended. So the two outstanding questions are what percent do we want to have a not to exceed? And it's important to keep that in mind. What we're putting in the ordinance is that the council annually fixes it and it cannot exceed whatever, 20%. I'm making that up. That doesn't mean that the homestead exemption is going to be 20%. I remember reading, I may have sent it to you guys, but I looked at a lot of sort of towns like ours that are tourism heavy, high value properties. Nantucket obviously is one of them. They have similar language that's very similar to this, and they have a 29% cap. Which honestly, I was sort of surprised that it was so high. That seems high to me. But it's just, that's really the number of how much flexibility do you want to give, right? To this and future town councils.
So I have a question. When we talk about that cap, right, is this where it would come into play that, like, right now we offer there's a veterans exemption, there's a senior exemption, and people can stack those, right? So I guess what I'm saying is those are the homeowners who are most likely to hit the cap, right?
And those two concepts are unrelated. So the cap that Keith is describing in the exemption cap is only related to the homestead exemption and what the council may set in any given year.
Oh, okay.
There is not a cap on the way that a property owner can stack senior veterans, and homestead exemptions.
Okay,
There are some other caps related to tangibles, but we're gonna ignore those.
Yeah.
so they would be able to stack those three, and then if we did a different one, if we did like a fire department exemption. Again, usually those are written in a way that allows you to stack them as personal exemptions. Okay, thank you.
I think to Keith's question, a lot of communities seem to have that language about a maximum and then setting every year. Many of them don't actually reset every year. They
Yeah.
are using the same percentage. But because you wind up with an effective tax rate when you give an exemption, there are limits under state law about one tax rate not being
Yes.
more than 50% greater than another,
Yes.
even if one is not a real tax rate, but an effective tax rate. So if you were playing with those in really close boundaries, you would want to set them annually in order to maximize, but
Right.
not be in violation of the law.
But if we're talking like 20%, that
For us,
doesn't, that
that's
doesn't
not
bump
gonna
us
be a
into that
consideration
place.
that we need to worry
That's
about.
really helpful. I'd forgotten about that
Yep.
part of it.
But
Yeah.
I think that's why it's written that way.
Yeah. Yeah. What do people think? Yeah. 20 makes sense to me. We may not set it at 20, but that gives you the pretty ultimate flexibility. Amy doesn't like 20.
No, I'm sorry,
Oh.
not judging your number. I'm just thinking about the process because we do have such a tight turnaround. If you approve the ordinance at the public hearing, the next item on the agenda will probably
to
be to
set
establish
the-
the rate.
yes,
So
right.
don't think you're getting
Yes.
too
No,
far.
No, I just, the important thing, as Molly and I were just talking about is to say over and over again, what we're doing here is not setting the homestead exemption. We're setting the cap up to which this town council and future town councils could establish the homestead
Mhm.
exemption. Could be 2%, could be 19%. Does 20 make sense? Want to hear that? This is,
Even number.
uh, do we need a motion for that, or should we can we just put 20 in to hear that? Yes, yeah. And then the other question is, do we stick with our rule, residency, which is 9 months, as I understand it, under 2-2, correct? What do people feel about that?
And just explain, where is that definition coming from? Is that, where does, so in the town ordinance, it says that a resident is someone who has this as their primary location for 9 months out of the year.
It's actually at the bottom.
At the bottom, if you look at the bottom of that page, it says 2-2C, full-time Block Island residency status is not affected by absence,
Oh, sorry.
whatever the
yeah,
reason,
got it.
whatever the reason, of up to 3 months in any calendar year, providing that the resident is also a registered Block Island voter. I think 9 months is pretty liberal,
I do too.
myself. Yeah, I think so. Look. I want to I mean, it's not like we're gonna have residency police, but I do think it sort of, I don't know, 9 months.
I think I don't think this is the time to change it because that ordinance is in place and we'll get even more confused. This time round, I'd stick with it, even though I do think it's extremely liberal, and I think one of the places that, thank you, Molly. One of the places that it's really showing up increasingly is in the difficulty that boards and committees are having in keeping a quorum or keeping a functioning body where you don't have to go back every 3 months and go over what you did because somebody wasn't here. And that's gotten exponentially worse in the last 5 years, maybe. I'm not even sure if that relates to this, I just wanted to say it.
No, I get where you're coming from on that. Now, we're not talking about changing 2-2. We're talking about
Right.
solely for purposes of the homestead exemption. What the duration is.
So they're separate, so that wouldn't require a ordinance change then, correct?
Unburdened as I am by a law degree, I believe.
No,
I believe we don't, I believe we don't have to.
it would not, however, I think that we have enough different, that there's the blanket overall residency, which is 9 months. And then there are some things which are specific to, I don't remember any of them, of course. I think there's a different one with, harbors or moorings or.
Mhm.
that-
Yeah,
that's
resident
all.
shellfish licenses, that kind
Can't
of thing.
say
Yeah.
China anymore, but,
See, I tend to agree with you on this because I think by making it 3 months, that we actually do become the residency police. Because
Uh-huh.
if we make it a shorter time frame, it's just, you know,
Yeah.
like, you kind of know who's here and who's not here. Like, you know, there's it's less flexible.
So from your perspective, does that argue for 9 months or, you know, something,
That someone lives here 9 months of the year or
yeah,
12 months.
or 12 months? You know, no, I mean, I just, I wasn't sure where we were going.
leading in Tristan's direction. I mean, you know, obviously people go on vacations and you're allowed to go on vacation and like all that kind of stuff, but you know, if you go to your second residence in Arizona or Florida or North Carolina for the 3 toughest months of the year to be here, it sort of defeats what we're doing.
if you're right, your house for $13,000 a week.
Here's what I would,
37 months.
here's what I would suggest practically for what it's worth. I think we should put it at 12 and hear it at 12. And, you know, let's see how it feels. I think we're putting this forward. We may have a very strong sense in the community that's other than that. And okay, let's have that conversation. But I think it'll probably be harder when we have the public hearing and are acting to move it up. So let's put it at 12. Let's hear it at 12 and let's see how people feel about it. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
So what is our date? What's our date, Millie?
Oh, yes. It's May 22nd at 3 p.m.
Can I have a motion to hold a public hearing on the homestead exemption, New Shoreham General Ordinance homestead exemption on, sorry. What was the date and time again?
May 22nd.
May 22nd at 3 p.m.
What, 3?
We are going to be meeting with the domestic violence group and South County Community Action at the same time. And in order to make it all work, we had to go with a 3 o'clock. If you want to, you can do 2 meetings that day. I prefer if you didn't, but you're welcome to.
3 is fine. I actually already have a meeting at 5:30 on my calendar for that day for a different organization, so.
Well, you better push that one back. So May 22nd at 3. A motion for a public hearing on this issue, May 22nd at 3. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. We're on. Thank you, Amy, Marianne, James Callahan, if you're here for, this has been a real harem scarum piece of work and I appreciate it. Do we need to go into closed session for item number 4? So we're going to go into closed session for people here and in the public on collective bargaining. Can I have a motion to, yes?
The meeting on the 22nd, will it be the first item or the third item?
It's, for those of us who are, it is going to be the third item.
Great. Say it work.
There you go.
Yes. Can I have a motion to go into closed session, please? All those, that's right.
I'm gonna.
You've got to
recuse
reduce.
myself.
That's right. Let's wait for Molly to get back. I don't think you and I constitute a
I
quorum.
don't.
As good as that might be for the